27 years of marriage is a long time to know someone. Long enough to memorize their habits, their little quirks, their quiet moods, and the way their voice shifts when they're happy, tired, or just going through the motions. At 58 years old, I thought I knew my wife Lori better than I knew myself. We'd grown up side by side, weathered every storm life threw at us, raised 2 kids, buried parents, survived tight financial years, and celebrated every small win together. To me, our marriage wasn't flashy or passionate like the movies. It was steady, loyal, safe, the kind of quiet love that lasts a lifetime. My name's Cole Mercer. For nearly 3 decades, I've lived for my family. I worked steady construction jobs through brutal summers and freezing winters, skipped unnecessary luxuries, and dedicated every free minute to making sure Lori and our kids never lacked for anything. I wasn't the most romantic guy in the world. I didn't shower her with expensive gifts or grand public gestures, but I showed up, every single day. I fixed what broke, held her when she cried, listened when she was stressed, and loved her consistently. Even when life got monotonous and ordinary, still, I'd noticed the distance creeping in over the past few months. Lori was 56, outgoing, social, always craving excitement and new moments to break up the routine of our quiet suburban life. Where we once spent every weekend together cooking, gardening, or taking small road trips, she'd started pulling away. She spent more time on her phone, stayed out longer with friends, and grew quiet and distracted whenever we had slow, peaceful evenings at home. I'd brushed it off as midlife restlessness. I told myself after nearly 30 years of marriage, routine could wear on anyone. I didn't take it personally. I figured she was just bored with the same old days, the same old house, the same quiet stability I'd always cherished. So when she came to me one Wednesday evening, lighting up with excitement about a girls' trip, I didn't hesitate to encourage her. "Marnie and I are heading up to Willow Lake for a 3-day fishing trip," she told me, grinning like she was a kid planning a summer adventure. "No phones much, no chores, just fresh air, fishing, and girl time. We've been planning it for weeks. It'll be good for me, clear my head." My heart softened at her enthusiasm. Willow Lake was a quiet, scenic lake resort 2.5 hours from our house, tucked away in the wooded hills. It was peaceful, private, exactly the kind of low-key getaway I thought she needed to unwind. I smiled and nodded, genuinely happy to see her so excited. "You deserve it," I told her honestly. "You've been burnt out with house stuff and errands lately. Go relax, have fun, catch some fish. I'll hold down the fort here." She hugged me quick, a fast, distant squeeze that didn't linger like it used to, then rushed off to pack her bags. Even then, I didn't read into it. I didn't notice the way she double-checked her phone before tucking it away, or how she kept her trip plans vague, never sharing exact cove locations or resort details. I was too busy being the supportive, trusting husband I'd always been. The first 2 days she was gone. I kept the house quiet, took care of the yard, and let her enjoy her break without a single check-in text or call. I wanted her to have pure, unrushed freedom. No worries, no obligations. But by the 3rd morning, I missed her fiercely. I missed her laugh around the house, her messy morning routine, the quiet companionship we'd shared for so long. That's when the idea hit me, a perfect heartfelt surprise. I'd drive up to Willow Lake unannounced, catch her by the water midday, and sweep her into a warm reunion. I'd bring her favorite peach wine, the homemade chocolate chip cookies she loved, and a small, delicate silver bracelet I'd picked up for our upcoming 28th anniversary. My plan was simple. Show her I saw her. I appreciated her, and I still wanted to chase small, sweet moments with her after all these years. I woke up early that morning, showered, packed the cooler and gift bag carefully, and hopped in my truck. The drive up through the winding wooded roads was peaceful. Sunlight filtering through the tree leaves, the whole world feeling calm and hopeful. I spent the entire drive daydreaming about her reaction, the shock, the smile, the tight hug she'd give me when she realized I'd driven hours just to see her. I pictured us sitting on the lake shore together, sharing snacks and wine, talking through the quiet distance that had grown between us, reconnecting like we used to. I thought this sweet, unexpected gesture would fix whatever mild disconnection had settled over our marriage. I truly believed this trip would bring us back to each other. I arrived at Willow Lake just after midday. The resort was quiet, with scattered cabins, wooden docks, and private fishing coves tucked along the water's edge. I parked my truck in the empty guest lot, grabbed my cooler and gift bag, and walked slowly toward the secluded northern cove Lori had briefly mentioned, the quiet, less crowded spot where she said she and Marnie would be fishing all day. The air smelled like pine trees and fresh lake water. Birds chirped softly over the gentle lapping of waves. Everything looked exactly like the peaceful, innocent girl's getaway she'd described. I walked quietly, not wanting to spoil the surprise early, my heart light and full of anticipation. I rounded the thick line of oak trees bordering the cove, ready to call out her name, ready to witness her shocked, happy face. But the second I stepped into the clearing by the water, every happy thought in my head died instantly. There were no fishing rods, no coolers full of girl snacks, no laughter between two best friends. There was no Marnie at all, only Lori, and a strange man, sitting far too close on the private shore, completely alone, completely absorbed in each other. My feet froze mid-step. My blood turned cold. Before I could blink or process what I was seeing, I realized my sweet, heartfelt surprise had just turned into the worst moment of my entire life. And I was about to stand trapped, helpless and shattered, for 10 endless, unforgettable minutes. Time stopped completely the second my eyes locked onto the scene on that quiet lakeshore. The soft rustle of pine trees, the gentle lap of lake water against the shore, the distant chirp of birds, all the peaceful sounds of the world faded into a muffled, hollow hum. My body locked up, rigid and unmoving, rooted to the dirt path like the trees lining the cove. I could not step forward, could not turn back, could not speak or breathe properly. All I could do was stare, trapped in a nightmare I had never seen coming. I stayed hidden behind the thick oak trunk, half concealed by overhanging branches and tall wild grass, my cooler and anniversary gift hanging heavy and useless in my hands. The sweet peach wine, the homemade cookies, the delicate silver bracelet I'd spent weeks picking out, every ounce of thought and love I'd poured into my surprise turned bitter and meaningless in an instant. Lori sat on the weathered wooden blanket. She'd laid across the sand, her shoulders relaxed, her head tilted up toward the stranger beside her. She wore the soft sundress she'd packed for her girls' fishing trip, her hair loose in the breeze, a bright, genuine smile on her face, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. It was warm, playful, unguarded, full of a joy I'd foolishly thought was just dormant, not dead. The man beside her was around our age, tall and lean, with an easy confidence I recognized instantly. He was Jesse, an old high school acquaintance I'd heard her mention once in passing, a man she'd reconnected with online months prior. I'd brushed it off as harmless small talk, old friends catching up after decades apart. I'd trusted her blindly, never imagining those casual messages would turn into secret meetings, hidden trips, and quiet, stolen moments behind my back. They were not fishing. There were no rods, no tackle boxes, no coolers filled with drinks and snacks for a girl's day out. There was no sign of Marnie anywhere, no trace of the best friend Lori had sworn would spend every minute of the trip with her. The entire fishing trip had been a lie, a perfectly crafted, carefully planned excuse to meet him alone, away from home, away from our life, away from me. I watched in silent agony as Jesse reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Lori's face, his touch slow, intimate, familiar. She did not pull away. She leaned into it, her smile softening into something tender and affectionate, something reserved only for lovers. He whispered something quiet to her, and she laughed, a light, breathless sound I hadn't heard from her in years. Then he took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, and squeezed gently. That small, simple gesture shattered me more than any grand betrayal ever could. For 27 years, I'd held her hands through grief and sickness, through stress and struggle, through every ordinary and extraordinary moment of our lives. I'd held her when our kids left home, when her parents passed, when life felt empty and monotonous. But in this hidden cove, miles from our home, she was letting another man hold her like she belonged to him. I stood frozen for 10 full minutes. 10 endless, torturous minutes that felt like an entire lifetime. I could not look away. My eyes burned, my chest constricted, and a sharp, burning pain spread through my chest, so intense I could barely draw breath. Every happy memory of our marriage flashed through my mind in cruel, rapid succession. Our wedding day, the birth of our children, the quiet nights we'd held each other through hard seasons, every promise we'd whispered about forever and loyalty and standing together. All of it had been a one-sided truth. I'd honored every vow. She'd hidden hers away, slowly breaking them piece by piece while I remained oblivious, loyal and devoted. During those 10 minutes, I watched them share quiet inside jokes, lean in close to talk in hushed tones, and even rest their heads near each other, comfortable and completely at peace in their secret bubble. They looked like a happy, loving couple, like I was the stranger intruding on their perfect moment, like I was the obstacle standing in the way of her happiness. The worst part was how natural it looked. There was no awkwardness, no guilt, no rushed secrecy. They were relaxed, unhurried, fully at ease. This was not a one-time mistake. This was routine. This was a relationship that had been growing in the shadows of our marriage for months, maybe longer, while I worked long hours, fixed our home, and loved her faithfully every single day. I thought back to all the small clues I'd ignored, all the red flags I'd brushed off as midlife weariness, the late-night phone calls she'd taken in private, the deleted text messages, the sudden urge for solo trips and girls' outings, the distant hugs, the distracted conversations, the way she'd stopped looking at me like I was her person. I'd been too loyal, too trusting, too committed to our quiet life to suspect the worst. I'd chosen to believe in her, and she'd chosen to deceive me. Slowly, after those torturous 10 minutes dragged to an end, I found the strength to move. My legs shook so badly I could barely stand. My vision blurred with hot, stinging tears I refused to let fall. I tightened my grip on the cooler and gift bag, my knuckles white with suppressed pain and rage, and stepped silently backward into the trees. I moved inch by inch, careful not to rustle a branch or make a single sound, terrified they would spot me and turn that private moment of betrayal into a public confrontation. I did not have the strength to face them, to speak, to argue. All I could do was escape, to get away from the shore that had just broken my entire world. Once I was far enough back into the wooded trail, I turned and walked numbly toward my truck. The hopeful light that had filled my heart on the drive up was completely gone, replaced by a cold, hollow emptiness that settled deep in my bones. The sun still shone bright, the lake still glistened beautifully, and the world still turned normally, but nothing in my life would ever be normal again. I tossed the anniversary gift and unopened wine cooler onto the passenger seat without a second glance, climbed into the driver's seat, and closed the door softly. The quiet click echoed loudly in the empty cab. I sat there for a long moment, staring blankly out at the tree line, replaying every second of those 10 frozen minutes on a brutal, endless loop. I had driven 2.5 hours to surprise my wife with love, warmth, and gratitude. Instead, I'd uncovered a secret betrayal that undermined 27 years of marriage. And as I gripped the steering wheel, ready to start the long, lonely drive home, I knew one terrifying truth. The lie was far bigger than I'd imagined. And the worst of this heartbreak was only just beginning. The drive back home was the longest 2.5 hours of my life. The truck's engine droned on in a dull, monotonous hum, but I barely heard it. The wind rushed through the open windows, carrying the crisp pine scent of the lake. Yet all I could smell was the bitter rot of betrayal clinging to every breath I took. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, my fingers locked tight enough to ache, my vision clouding over again and again with the images I could not escape. Every curve of the road, every stretch of open highway, forced me to relive those 10 frozen minutes on that lake shore. I saw her smile again, the bright, unguarded grin she never saved for me anymore. I felt the ghost of Jesse's touch on her hair, the gentle squeeze of their intertwined hands, the quiet intimacy of two people who'd built a love story hidden entirely behind my back. No amount of blinking, no amount of focusing on the road ahead could erase the scene that had shattered my 27 years of marriage in an instant. Grief crashed over me in brutal, unrelenting waves. It was not just anger, not just hurt. It was the slow, suffocating sorrow of losing a life I'd believed in completely. For 27 years, I'd built our marriage brick by brick. I'd worked overtime to pay our bills, fixed every leaky roof and broken appliance, comforted her through every heartache, celebrated every small joy beside her. I'd forgiven her flaws, overlooked her moods, loved her steadily even when the fire of young romance faded into quiet routine. I'd thought that was commitment. I'd thought that was forever. Turns out I'd been building a life on a lie. I replayed every overlooked red flag, every tiny deception I'd brushed off as harmless. The nights she'd locked her phone face down, the vague excuses for last-minute outings, the way she'd grown distant and distracted, claiming she was just tired or bored with ordinary life. I'd been too loyal, too trusting, too stubbornly faithful to consider the truth. I'd assumed our marriage was safe because I'd never once broken my vows. I'd foolishly believed loyalty was mutual. The worst pain was the realization of how long this had been going on. That lakeside moment hadn't been a spontaneous mistake. It had been comfortable, familiar, effortless. They'd laughed together, shared quiet secrets, leaned into each other like they belonged. This affair wasn't new. It had been growing in the shadows for months, maybe longer, while I lived in oblivious contentment. Proud of the stable, loving family I'd maintained. I thought of Marnie, Lori's best friend, the woman who'd supposedly joined her for a quiet fishing trip. She'd known. She'd helped lie, covered for Lori's absences, played along with the girls' trip facade, and watched me continue to love and trust my wife blindly. Two people I'd cared for, two people I'd never doubted, had conspired to deceive me for months on end. By the time I hit the main highway, rage began to mix with my sorrow. A cold, calm rage. Not the fiery urge to scream and fight, but the heavy, quiet kind that settles deep in your bones. I'd spent my entire marriage showing up. I'd never cheated, never lied, never left her lonely or unsupported. I'd chosen her every single day. And she'd chosen to throw it all away for a fleeting thrill, for an old flame, for a secret life that excluded me entirely. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat halfway home, cutting through the numbing silence. I didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. Only one person would be texting me right now, midway through her fake girls' trip. I glanced down, my chest tightening sharply at the sight of Lori's name lighting up the display. Her text was bright, cheerful, utterly deceptive, crafted perfectly to keep me in the dark, having the best day. Marnie and I caught a whole string of bass by the North Cove. The lake's gorgeous, weather's perfect. Missing you tons, be home soon. The words burned into my vision. Missing you tons. She'd been sitting in another man's arms less than an hour before she sent that message. She'd laughed with him, touched him, shared intimate moments with him, then picked up her phone and typed out a sweet, loving lie like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't broken every vow, every promise, every piece of our 27-year bond. A lesser man would have called her immediately, would have screamed, would have driven straight back to the lake and confronted them both on the shore. But I didn't. I sat in my truck, staring at her fake sweetness, and made a quiet, painful decision. I wouldn't blow up. I wouldn't react impulsively. I wouldn't give her the chance to lie her way out, to blame stress, to call it a mistake, to twist the truth until I looked like the irrational one. I needed time. Time to process. Time to piece together every hidden truth she'd buried. Time to gather every loose thread of her lies and weave them into unbreakable proof. If I was going to end the life I'd known, if I was going to confront the woman I'd loved more than anything, I would do it on my terms, calm, steady, and unshakable. I typed back a short, neutral reply, my fingers moving mechanically. No warmth, no affection left in my words. Glad you're having fun. Be safe. I slipped my phone back into the cup holder, face down, and kept driving. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the highway in orange and gold, but I felt no warmth. The entire world felt gray and hollow. Every memory I'd cherished, our wedding dance, the birth of our kids, the quiet nights we'd held each other through grief, now felt like a performance I'd watched alone. I arrived home as dusk settled over our quiet neighborhood. The house looked the same as it always had, warm, familiar, full of decades of our shared history. The flower beds Lori loved tended neatly, the porch light glowing softly, the driveway empty without her car. To anyone passing by, it looked like the home of a happy, stable married couple. Only I knew it was nothing more than a beautiful facade, built on lies and betrayal. I carried the unopened anniversary gift and untouched wine into the house and set them on the kitchen counter, leaving them exactly where they fell. I didn't bother putting them away. They were just reminders of how foolish my love had been, how pure my intentions, how thoroughly she'd discarded every part of my devotion. For the next 2 days, I lived in a strange, quiet limbo. I went through the motions of daily life, mowed the lawn, cleaned the house, cooked simple meals, all while my mind raced endlessly, dissecting every lie, every hidden meeting, every moment she'd chosen someone else over me. I didn't sleep. I didn't rest. I just waited for her to come home, waited for the mask to slip, waited for the moment I could no longer avoid the truth. My marriage was dead, even if she was still pretending it was alive. Late on the 3rd night, my phone pinged again. A new message from Lori. Packing up now. Heading home first thing tomorrow morning. Can't wait to hug you. I stared at the screen, my heart cold and hardened. The liar was coming home, and tomorrow, the perfect life she'd been faking for months would finally crumble to the ground. The night before Lori came home was the longest, most sleepless night of my life. I lay in our shared bed for hours, staring up at the dark ceiling, my mind spinning nonstop through every lie, every hidden moment, every red flag I'd spent months ignoring. The house was quiet, too quiet, and every empty corner felt like it echoed with the secrets my wife had buried right beneath my nose. I didn't toss and turn in angry desperation. I lay still, calm and cold, choosing clarity over chaos. I was no longer just a hurt husband. I was a man uncovering the truth, piece by piece. I'd spent 2 days in limbo, replaying the lakeside scene on loop, but now I stopped dwelling on the pain. I started dwelling on the pattern. If that intimate moment at Willow Lake wasn't a one-time mistake, and I knew it wasn't, then Lori's entire world over the past year had been a carefully constructed fraud. Every girls' night, every last-minute errand, every quiet evening she'd spent glued to her phone had never been what she claimed. Every excuse had been a shield for her secret relationship with Jesse. Once sunrise broke over the rooftops, I rose from bed quietly. I moved through the house slowly, methodically, no longer afraid of what I might find. For 27 years, I'd respected her privacy, never snooped through her phone, never checked her bank statements, never questioned her friendships or her spending habits. Trust had been the foundation of our marriage. Now that foundation was shattered, and I owed myself the truth. I started with her home office, a small, sunlit room she'd claimed was for bookkeeping and hobby planning. The desk was neat, almost too neat, like she'd deliberately cleared away any trace of wrongdoing. But lies always leave crumbs. I opened her desk drawer and found a stack of forgotten receipts tucked beneath a notebook. Gas station receipts from highways leading to Willow Lake, dated weeks before her supposed fishing trip. Coffee shop receipts from towns halfway between our home and the lake resort. Small restaurant tabs for 2, dated on weekends she'd told me she was shopping with Marnie. My hands tightened around the paper slips as the full picture clicked into place. This trip wasn't the first time they'd met. It was just the first time she dared to lie so boldly, to fabricate an entire girl's getaway to spend uninterrupted time with him. She'd been sneaking off for months, stealing hours and days from our marriage, all while I stayed home, faithful and unsuspecting, tending to our house and our life. Next, I checked our shared bank account history on my laptop. I'd never monitored her personal spending before, always believing she was honest and responsible with our money. But the transactions told a damning story. Small, frequent cash withdrawals I'd never noticed before. Random gift shop charges from Laketown stores. Expensive boutique purchases that never made their way home to our closets. She'd been spending our marital funds to fuel her secret meetings, to look good for another man, while I pinched pennies for our household bills and future savings. The worst discovery came when I cross-referenced her absences with old text conversations I'd never bothered to save. Scrolling through our chat history, I found dozens of vague, deceptive messages dating back nearly 8 months. Running errands with Marnie, be back late, girls' coffee night, don't wait up, heading out for a quick drive to clear my head. Every single one of those innocent lines had been a lie. Every excuse had covered a meeting with Jesse. Marnie's involvement stung deeper than I expected. I'd known Marnie for decades, watched her grow alongside Lori, considered her a trusted family friend. She'd sat at our holiday tables, celebrated our kids' birthdays, comforted Lori through hard days, and laughed with us through good ones. And all that time, she'd been an active accomplice. She'd texted me fake updates during the fishing trip, posted staged fishing photos on her social media to sell the lie, and stood by silently while Lori destroyed our marriage. Their friendship wasn't innocent. It was a partnership built on deceiving me. I realized then why Lori had grown so distant, so bored with our quiet routine. It wasn't midlife restlessness. It wasn't fatigue with ordinary marriage life. It was guilt. It was distraction. It was the thrill of a secret romance making our stable, loving life feel dull by comparison. She'd stopped investing in us because she was investing every spare part of her heart, her time and our money in someone else. By mid-morning, I had a folder full of proof, receipts, transaction records, old text screenshots, and timelines that mapped out every single lie. I didn't do this out of spite. I did it to ground myself in reality, to make sure I wasn't overreacting, wasn't imagining the betrayal that had broken me at the lake. Every piece of evidence confirmed the brutal truth. My wife had been living a double life for nearly a year. I shut my laptop and stared out the window at our quiet neighborhood, at the green lawns and peaceful homes, at the life we'd built together. It all felt like a hollow set, a stage for her elaborate performance as a loyal, loving wife. I'd been the only audience member, fooled for months on end. My phone buzzed midday, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Lori, texting bright and breezy, no hint of guilt or hesitation. "On the road home! Traffic's light. I'll be there in a couple hours. Missed you so much." I stared at the message. No anger flaring, no sadness lingering, only cold, steady resolve. She was coming home ready to hug me, ready to laugh and chat about her fake fishing trip, ready to slip back into the role of my devoted wife, like nothing had happened. She thought her secret was safe, that her lies were unbroken, that I was still the oblivious, trusting husband she'd manipulated for months. But I knew everything now. I had the proof. I had the timeline. I had the clarity I'd needed to stop the one-sided love that had defined our marriage for 27 years. I typed a single, plain reply, "See you soon." I closed my phone and stood up, straightening my shoulders. The waiting was over. The digging was done. The liar was on her way home, walking straight into the truth she'd spent so long hiding. And when she stepped through that front door, her perfect fake life would shatter completely. The confrontation I'd been bracing for was finally moments away. I spent the next 2 hours in still, unbroken silence. I didn't clean the house for her arrival. I didn't fix a meal or tidy the countertops or rush to put on a warmer mood like I always had in the past. I simply sat at the kitchen table, the folder full of proof resting flat before me, every receipt, every screenshot, every recorded lie staring up like a quiet judgment. My hands were steady, my mind clear, no longer clouded by shock or grief. I was no longer the husband desperate to save his marriage. I was a man waiting to face the truth. Through the front window, I watched the afternoon sunlight shift slow and golden across our front yard. This house had always been our safe place, the spot where we'd raised our children, celebrated anniversaries, recovered from illness and loss, and built every good memory we'd ever shared. For 27 years, I'd come home to this house expecting honesty, partnership, and loyalty. I'd believed the walls held nothing but genuine love. Now I knew they'd held months of hidden deception, quiet guilt, and a double life I'd never once suspected. Shortly before 4 o'clock, I heard the familiar crunch of tires on our gravel driveway. My body didn't flinch. My heart didn't race. I simply sat up straighter, my gaze fixed on the front door, ready to watch her performance begin. Lori stepped out of her car moments later, bright and bouncy, her weekend bag slung over one shoulder, her hair wind-tousled from the drive. She looked exactly like a woman returning home from a harmless, fun girls' getaway, relaxed, cheerful, completely at ease with herself. She scanned the front yard quickly, probably checking for any sign that I'd grown suspicious, any crack in the perfect story she'd spent days building. Finding nothing out of place, she smiled to herself and walked toward the porch. The second she pushed open the front door, she lit up dramatically, throwing her arms open like she'd missed me terribly. "Babe, I'm home!" she called out, her voice warm and affectionate, overflowing with fake tenderness. She crossed the room quickly and pulled me into a tight hug, pressing her cheek against mine, her scent a mix of lake air and her usual perfume. I let her hug me. I didn't pull away, didn't stiffen, didn't give her a single clue that I knew every secret she'd hidden. I stood passive in her arms, feeling the hollow falseness of her embrace. This wasn't the hug of a remorseful wife returning home to her husband. It was the calculated, practiced hug of a liar covering her tracks. When she pulled back, she studied my face for a split second, searching for any tension, any hurt, any doubt. Finding my expression calm and unreadable, she relaxed completely and launched into her rehearsed story. You would have loved the lake, Cole. The weather was perfect. The water was so clear, and Marnie and I caught so many fish we almost didn't know what to do with them. We laughed nonstop, stayed up late talking by the fire. It was such a reset. She rambled on, spinning detailed, vivid lies, talking about fake fishing struggles, fake inside jokes with Marnie, fake sunset walks along the shore. Every word fell smooth and effortless from her lips. Proof she'd practiced this story long before driving home. She'd planned every detail, every excuse, every harmless anecdote to make her fake trip believable. I listened to every word without interruption. I watched her eyes dart around the room, watched her smile never reach her full gaze, watched her perform the role of loving wife so naturally it made me sick. She had spent months perfecting this deception, growing skilled at lying to my face while I loved and trusted her blindly. It sounds wonderful, I said simply, my tone neutral. No warmth, no bitterness, just quiet observation. Her smile widened, relieved by my lack of suspicion. She set her bag down and wandered through the house, chattering about how she'd missed our quiet home, missed our routine, missed being with me. She touched the furniture, commented on how well I'd kept up the yard, praised the tidy kitchen, small, gentle gestures designed to rebuild connection, to lull me back into our normal, trusting dynamic. For the rest of the evening, she never dropped the act. She cooked dinner, laughed at small jokes, sat beside me on the couch while we watched television, and leaned into my side like nothing had ever been wrong. She was affectionate, present, and endlessly loving. Too perfect, like she was overcompensating for the secret sin she carried. Every gentle touch, every sweet comment, every loving glance felt like a knife twist. I knew where she'd been. I knew who she'd held. I knew the smiles she'd given another man, the quiet words she'd whispered in someone else's ear, the time and affection she'd stolen from our marriage. Yet here she was, pretending she'd spent every moment of her trip with her best friend, completely devoted to our life. That night, I texted my oldest friend Mark, the only person I'd ever trusted with my deepest struggles. I told him everything, the surprise trip, the 10 frozen minutes on the lake shore, the months of lies I'd uncovered, the receipts and messages proving her year-long affair. He didn't rush me to confront her, didn't push me to lash out or end things immediately. Don't explode, he advised firmly. Confrontation needs to be calm and unshakable. Let her finish her act. Let her dig her own grave with her lies. When you speak with proof, not emotion. His words settled firmly in my chest, solidifying the choice I'd already made. I wouldn't have a screaming match. I wouldn't beg for honesty. I wouldn't plead for her love or loyalty. I would lay every truth, every lie, every piece of proof directly in front of her, and force her to face the wreckage she'd created. By bedtime, Lori was completely comfortable, fully convinced her secret was still safe. She curled up beside me in our bed, resting her head on my shoulder like she belonged there without guilt or fault. Her ease was heartbreaking. She truly believed she'd gotten away with it all. But I lay awake beside her long after she fell asleep, staring into the darkness. The folder of evidence tucked safely in my desk drawer, every lie fresh in my mind. I'd waited long enough. I'd watched her perform long enough. I'd tolerated her deception long enough. Tomorrow, the act would end. Tomorrow, I would sit her down in this quiet living room, strip away every mask she wore, and shatter the perfect fake life she'd built. After months of secrets and lies, the truth was finally going to come out, and there would be no going back from the confrontation waiting just around the corner. The next morning started like any ordinary day. Sunlight streamed through the living room windows, casting soft golden streaks across the carpet we'd laid down together 15 years ago. The coffee maker hummed in the kitchen, filling the house with a familiar, comforting aroma. To anyone watching from the outside, we were just a typical long-married couple sharing a peaceful weekend morning. But the calm was nothing more than a thin, fragile veil, seconds away from being torn apart forever. Lori moved through the house with easy, practiced cheerfulness. She hummed softly while she poured 2 mugs of coffee, fixed my creamer exactly how I liked it, and carried both cups over to the couch where I sat waiting. Her movements were effortless, her smile warm and unguarded, every detail calculated to reinforce the perfect marriage facade she'd spent so long building. "Here you go, honey," she said, settling down beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. "I slept so good last night. It feels amazing to be home with you again. The lake was fun, but nothing beats our quiet little house." I took the coffee mug from her hands, but I didn't drink it. I set it gently on the side table beside me, my gaze steady and unblinking as I turned to face her. There was no anger in my eyes, no rage, no desperate hurt, only quiet, unyielding truth. I'd spent enough nights drowning in pain. Now it was her turn. "Lori," I said softly, my voice calm and flat, no trace of the loving tone she was used to. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered for half a second, a tiny flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. She recovered quickly, forcing a light laugh as she leaned back against the couch cushions. "Of course we do. I've got so many more stories to tell you about the trip. Marnie and I." There was no trip with Marnie. I cut her off gently, firmly, leaving no room for her to keep lying. There were no fishing rods, no late-night campfire talks, no girls' day at the lake. Every single story you told me last night was a lie. The color drained instantly from her face. Her smile vanished completely, and the relaxed, affectionate energy melted into pure, raw panic. She froze mid-breath, her eyes wide and guilty, caught completely off guard by my blunt honesty. For the first time since she'd come home, her perfect mask cracked wide open. "Cole, what are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice shaky and defensive. "That's ridiculous. Marnie and I were at Willow Lake the entire time. I don't know why you'd say something like that. Are you feeling okay? Are you stressed?" She tried to gaslight me, just like she'd gaslit herself for months. She tried to twist my clarity into stress, paranoia, overthinking, anything to shift the blame away from her betrayal. But I'd come prepared. I reached beside me and lifted the folder full of evidence, setting it down squarely on the coffee table between us. "I'm not stressed," I said quietly. "I'm not imagining things. I know exactly what happened. I have receipts from the lake town dating back 6 months. I have bank transactions for 2-person dinners on weekends you claimed you were shopping with Marnie. I have screenshots of every vague excuse you sent me while you were with him." Her hands began to tremble in her lap. Her eyes darted from the folder to my face, then back to the folder, her composure crumbling rapidly. Still, she refused to surrender, clinging desperately to her lies. "This is insane," she whispered, shaking her head frantically. "You're digging into old receipts and making up stories? Cole, this is jealousy. This is insecurity. You're ruining a perfect weekend over nothing." I leaned forward slightly, my gaze locking into hers, and delivered the final, unbreakable truth that shattered every last one of her defenses. "I drove to Willow Lake that day," I said. "I drove 2.5 hours to surprise you. I brought your favorite wine, your favorite cookies, and an anniversary gift. I walked up to the North Cove to find you fishing with your best friend. Instead, I found you alone with Jesse. I watched you hold his hand. I watched him touch your face. I watched you laugh with him like I haven't seen you laugh with me in years. I stood there frozen for 10 minutes, Lori. I saw everything." Silence crashed over the living room like a tidal wave. Every trace of fight, every ounce of denial, every desperate attempt to gaslight me vanished in an instant. Lori's shoulders collapsed, her head dropping forward, her lips trembling uncontrollably. The bright, loving wife persona was gone completely. All that remained was a guilty, terrified woman caught red-handed in her betrayal. Tears spilled down her cheeks fast and hot, but I felt no sympathy. These weren't tears of remorse for hurting me. They were tears of getting caught. I didn't think you'd find out, she breathed, her voice broken and small. I never meant for you to see any of it. Cole, please. It wasn't what it looked like. What did it look like then? I asked, my tone cold and unwavering. What part of sitting alone with another man on a private shore, holding hands and sharing intimate moments with him, was not what it looked like? She scrambled for excuses, rushing to defend her selfish choices after months of secrecy. Our marriage got so boring. Every day is the same routine, the same chores, the same quiet life. I felt invisible. I felt like you didn't see me anymore, like I was just a housewife going through the motions. Jesse made me feel alive again. He made me feel young and noticed. Her words cut deep, but they also clarified everything. She hadn't cheated because I'd failed her. She'd cheated because she'd grown selfish, greedy for excitement, bored with the steady, loyal life I'd spent 27 years building for her. She'd traded lifelong loyalty for temporary thrills, and now she blamed me for her own choices. I worked every single day to give you stability, I replied, my voice thick with years of unappreciated sacrifice. I skipped vacations, worked through pain, handled every stress of this family so you could have an easy, peaceful life. I showed up for you when your parents died, when our kids left home, when you were depressed and lost. I never made you feel invisible. I loved you consistently while you were out living a secret life. Lori's tears came harder now, her body shaking with quiet sobs. She reached out, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled away before she could touch me. I could not bear the feel of her lying, unfaithful hands on mine. I'm so sorry, she cried, her voice cracking. I was stupid and reckless. It was a mistake, Cole. A terrible, terrible mistake. It didn't mean anything. I love you. I love our life. Please, please forgive me. Don't let 27 years of marriage end over one stupid lapse in judgment. She leaned forward, begging now, her pride completely broken. All the confidence, all the deception, all the secret excitement was gone. She was left with nothing but the wreckage she'd created, and she was desperate to fix it before she lost everything. I stared at her tear-streaked face, at the woman I'd loved and trusted for nearly 3 decades, and felt my heart split open. 27 years of memories, promises, and shared history hung in the balance. But one brutal truth remained unshakable. The woman kneeling before me, begging for forgiveness, was the same woman who'd lied to my face for months, who'd hidden a secret affair, who'd chosen another man over our marriage again and again. The room stayed thick with suffocating silence as she waited for my answer, her entire future hanging on my next words. But I had no forgiveness to give her, not yet. All I had was pain, clarity, and a marriage that would never ever be the same again. True forgiveness is never granted in the heat of someone's tears. It is earned through consistent, honest change. And in the quiet aftermath of our confrontation, I knew Lori had not earned mine. I watched her break down on the couch, yet I felt no relief, no satisfaction. Only crippling exhaustion. For 27 years, I'd loved steadily, loyally, and quietly, built our entire life from the ground up. She'd grown bored with routine, chased fleeting excitement, and buried our marriage in months of calculated lies. This wasn't a mistake, I told her firmly. This was endless choices. You chose to lie, to sneak around, and to let Marnie cover for you. You chose him over us, again and again. Her excuses about loneliness and feeling invisible fell hollow. I'd spent decades stabilizing her life, sacrificing my own wants and needs to give her comfort and security. She'd simply grown greedy for a thrill I could never give her within our steady marriage. In the weeks that followed, Lori scrambled to fix the damage. She cut off Marnie, erased all traces of Jesse from her phone, and threw herself into endless acts of atonement, cooking, cleaning, and apologizing relentlessly. She clung to me, desperate to erase her betrayal with good behavior, but remorse cannot rebuild broken trust. I moved into the guest room, creating a firm boundary between us. I could not lie beside her, not when every closed eye brought back the image of that lakeside cove. Her smiling, relaxed and utterly happy in another man's company, while I remained the oblivious, loyal husband at home. Marnie called with a guilty, half-hearted apology for aiding Lori's lies and watching our marriage fall apart in silence. I listened, then cut her off completely. Some enablers do not deserve second chances. Just as I began to wonder if healing was possible, the final truth surfaced. Jessie texted Lori again, refusing to let her walk away. By pure chance, I saw the message, and her panicked reaction told me everything. She had never fully cut him off. A part of her still clung to the thrill of their secret affair, still regretted losing that reckless excitement. That was the end of all my hope for reconciliation. I sat her down one last time, calm and unwavering. I gave you every chance to choose us fully. I was ready to heal, to move past this, but you still choose chaos and lies. I've spent 27 years loving you faithfully. I will not spend the rest of my life loving a version of you that never chooses me back. Lori begged and pleaded, promising permanent change and full transparency. But her empty words no longer moved me. I was no longer fighting to save our marriage. I was fighting to save my own peace. We separated quietly, no bitter fights, no cruel resentment. We simply accepted that our 27 years of history could not outlast the damage of her betrayal. The stable, perfect life we'd built was irreparably broken. After the separation, the fake thrill of Lori's secret affair quickly faded. Without the safety of our marriage to fall back on, her connection with Jessie fizzled out completely. She was left alone, forced to confront the consequences of her selfish choices. Months later, she reached out truly humbled, with no excuses left. I threw away the only good thing I ever had, she admitted. I finally see all your sacrifices. I know how good you were to me. I forgave her, not for her benefit, but to free myself from years of lingering hurt and wasted devotion. Still, I chose no reconciliation. Some bridges burned forever, not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect. I slowly rediscovered the parts of myself I'd buried for decades. I traveled, reconnected with friends, and built a peaceful life centered on my own happiness instead of endless sacrifice. I learned the hardest, most vital lesson. Love without mutual respect and loyalty is not love at all. It is one-sided captivity. I never got the warm, joyful reunion I'd driven hours to find at the lake that day. My heartfelt surprise turned into my life's hardest heartbreak. Yet that devastating betrayal set me free. In the end, marriage is not about one person sacrificing everything to keep the other comfortable. It is about two people choosing each other every single day. I lost the marriage I'd cherished, but I finally gained myself, and that is the second chance that matters most.